Just War Project by Chris Hanna and Jonathan Heinen. We chose to do the project on the Korean War. At the end of World War II, American and Soviet forces entered Korea to disarm the Japanese troops stationed there. The Allies divided Korea at the 38th parallel of latitude. Soviet troops controlled the north, and American troops controlled the south. When the Cold War began, talks to reunify Korea broke down. A communist Korea was organized in the north, while an American-backed government controlled the south. Border clashes were common because both governments claimed authority of Korea.
So the just war criteria is as follows: just cause, right intention, competent authority, comparative justice, last resort, probability of success, and proportionality. For the just cause aspect of the criteria, war may be used only to correct a grave public evil, aggression, or massive violation of the basic human rights of the whole population. With right intention, war can be legitimately intended for a just cause.
The aggression that justifies the just cause aspect is that the North Korean troops attacked South Korea unprovoked and pushed deep into South Korea. There was tension between the communist North and the more democratic South. Following World War II, Korea was divided into the North and South at the Potsdam Conference. The ulterior motives for engaging in the war is that the UN's Security Council agreed it was a violation of human rights in South Korea. The US wanted to contain the spread of communism in Eastern Asia, and South Korea was and is an ally of the United States, and thus the criteria for just war was met here.
Competent authority is the idea that only duly constituted public authorities may use deadly force or wage war. The UN Security Council declared war, which is odd because this authority is charged with maintaining international peace and security. Its powers include the establishment of peacekeeping operations and of international sanctions and the authorization of military actions. War was declared on June 25, 1950. A unanimous vote was passed condemning the North Korean invasion of the Republic of Korea, South Korea, through the United Nations Security Council Resolution 82. The resolution demanded North Korea to withdraw its troops and move them back behind the 38th parallel, but these demands were ignored. This action led to the Council to pass the Resolution 83, recommending military assistance to South Korea. On June 27, 1950, President Truman ordered both air and sea assistance to help South Korea. The criteria for just war was met here.
Comparative justice is the idea that while there may be rights and wrongs on all sides of a conflict, to override the presumption against the use of force, the injustice suffered by one party must significantly outweigh that suffered by the other. The South Koreans suffered the greater injustice because the North Koreans were persecuting them in an attempt to unify North and South Korea under the northern leader Kim Il-sung. The North was attempting to rid the South of its democratic government, forcing a communist form instead. Along with attempting to force communism on the South, the initial North Korean invasion was enacted unjustly, as it was disguised as a counterattack to South Korea's crossing of the border, blaming the South for initiating the conflict. The South Koreans were also heavily outnumbered. The North Korean army had between 150,000 to 200,000 troops, 210 fighter planes, and 280 tanks, while the South only had about 98,000 soldiers, 22 air defense units, and 0 tanks. Without the intervention of the United States, the Southerners would have been massacred. So yes, the criteria was met here.
Last resort is the idea that force may be used only after all peaceful alternatives have been seriously tried and exhausted. No formal attempts were made at peace. North Korea was set on uniting the peninsula under one government. The armistice that was agreed upon was the only peace talk between the two sides. So yes, war was the only choice. North Korea was rapidly advancing on the last South Korean stronghold and was only going to stop if major world powers began to help South Korea fight. The criteria for just war was also met here.
Probability of success is the idea that arms may not be used in a futile cause or in a case where disproportionate measures are required to achieve success. The consequences of not engaging in war would be that South Korea would be taken over as a communist state and communism would spread through Eastern Asia. This would lessen the strength of the United Nations and the human rights of the South Koreans would be taken away. The potential for success was based off of the fact that the USSR agreed they would not enter the war. North Korea only had 250,000 troops compared to the United Nations' 1 million troops. The US generals agreed that the war would be quick and decisive. The criteria for just war was met here.
Proportionality is the idea that the overall destruction expected from the use of force must be outweighed by the good to be achieved. The goods that were going to be achieved were peace and democracy for South Korea and the Korean Peninsula, stopping the spread of communism, and the industrialization and modernization of South Korea. The good effects outweigh the bad effects because without intervention, South Korea would have become communist, would have become a communist state as well as a starting point for communist intervention in Japan. Also, the South Koreans would lose their human rights for freedom and democracy. The criteria for just war was met here.
Overall, the US's intervention is justified. Their ally, South Korea, was unfairly attacked and the UN ordered South Korea's allies to help them. The communist North Korea offered no peaceful solutions. South Korea's rights to freedom and democracy were taken away by North Korea. It wasn't until China became involved in the war that the armistice was agreed upon.
The Korean War met all of the just war criteria, which justifies the violence used by the US against the communists.